I'm continuing to work my way through this classical tragedy, Greek and Roman book, and I now come to the Bakkhai by Euripides. Now, this is the strangest play in the whole collection so far. The rest of them, I mean, they were all tragedies. None of them ended on a high note. They were all downers. I guess the Greeks loved their tragedies. But they all made sense. I mean, you knew what the author was going for, more or less. There was a tragic hero, a tragic downfall. The ending, it was clear who had been humiliated and why. Sometimes you knew why. But the Bakkhai, I wasn't quite sure what we were going for here. It seemed like there were a few different things going on. On the one hand, this play starts out as seems to be a celebration of the cult of Bacchus. And his orgies and sex festivals and dancing and wine. And it seems to be the type of play that would appeal to the hippies. And indeed, I think this play did indeed appeal to the hippies. I think this got a revival in the 60s. But you can see, reading through some of this dialogue maybe, it talks about the going out and dancing. Here we go. So the Bacchus who found a vital juice in the grape cluster, wine. So a celebration of wine and mind-altering substances. When men drink their fill, it stops grief by drowning the day's troubles in sleep. How else could we ease the ache of living? What's more, we sprinkle drops of this god to summon other gods when we need their help. Always the good life flows through Bacchus. And then Cadmus earlier talks about the joy of dancing, even though he's very old. So we'll go there, tossing our heads, making the gray hair fly. We'll never tire, not if we leap and whirl all night and then spend the whole day drumming the ground with our green wands. It's pure joy to forget how old I am. So Cadmus and Tiresias, and I'll come back to them later, are talking about the joys of getting caught up in the ecstasy of Bacchus with the wine and the dancing. And it's mentioned... I'm not sure I can find the quote right now, but it's mentioned in a few other places, the orgies and all the sex that accompany Bacchus. So dancing, free love and orgies, lots of wine and getting drunk out of your gourd and mind-altering substances, in this case, the wine. All that sounds very libertine and joyful. But then the ending of this is dark, dark, dark. And you're like, whoa, where did that really dark ending come from? Why are we getting so dark here at the end? So I was a little bit struggling to know what to make of it. I mean, I vaguely knew that this play had a weird reputation before starting it. I've consulted Wikipedia page for what that's worth, and this edition that I read also has an essay at the end of every play. So the essay here was helpful in helping me to understand the play to a certain extent. To a certain extent, it raised some new questions, and maybe I'll get to that as I go. Oh, by the way, just a little point here. You might notice the spelling is different. So I think 2 C's is how it's usually spelled, but 2 K's is how it's been spelled in this edition I have here. Anyways, let's just go through this play. I'll talk about what I noticed in it and the interesting things along the way, maybe, and maybe we'll try and make some sense of this. So this play is about the origin of Dionysus and the cult of Bacchus. Now, it's a little bit confusing, but Dionysus and Bacchus, I think, are the same, two different words for the same god. I was checking this out on Wikipedia. Dionysus is the Greek form of the god, and Bacchus is the way the Romans referred to this god. So, I mean, if you know anything about Greek and Roman mythology, you know that all the gods have two names, one Greek name and one Roman name. But actually, it looks like both Dionysus and Bacchus originated from the Greek. So Dionysus had two names in the Greek tradition, Dionysus and Bacchus. And then the Romans later adapted the name Bacchus. Somebody correct me if I'm getting this muddled. In this play, Dionysus refers to kind of the god as he takes human form. And the Bacchus or the Bakkhai refers to his followers or the spirit of ecstasy as it overtakes them. The point was made in the essay at the back of this play that there are really two beings here. There's Dionysus, the the kind of god in human form, and there's Bacchus or the Bakkhai, the spirit of ecstasy. And they're really best treated as two separate entities, that describes at the back. Maybe it's akin to the idea of God the Father and God the Holy Spirit, or I don't know, maybe that's stretching things. Anyways, Dionysus, I believe, if you go to Wikipedia, has a few different origin stories. But the origin story we're going off of in this play, is that Zeus seduced one of Cadmus's daughters, how do you pronounce that? Semele, and Bacchus was born of that union. Now, here's another little detour I'm going to take. I was vaguely familiar with the basic concept of the story before. And again, the basic concept of the story, spoilers, is that a king tries to prevent the rites of Dionysus, the celebration of Dionysus. He goes out to spy on Dionysus's followers, and he's ripped apart by the followers, which include his mother, because they're overcome by the ecstasy of Dionysus and don't know what they're doing. And that's kind of his tragic end. And that's what the story I thought I knew. Although, as we'll get into it, we'll explore that the story gets a whole lot more tragic even after that happens. Where was I? Oh, right. Point being, I was vaguely familiar with this story from just reading collections of Greek myths when I was a kid. But the thing I never really appreciated when I was a kid, and I think this is because those collections of Greek myths that you get for kids, you get for 11 or 12-year-olds or whatever, they tend to present these Greek myths as a series of isolated stories. At least the ones I read did. Or at least that's the impression I got from them. And I didn't really appreciate until relatively recently how these stories are all interconnected to each other. They're all just kind of one long saga where one story leads into another story. And so you can isolate them, but they also all flow together. So this story is part of the saga of the royal family of Thebes. So Cadmus, spelled with a K here, but often spelled with a C in other by other translators, is the founder of Thebes and the founder of the royal dynasty of Thebes. And he has he originally had some adventures where he overcame some obstacles, and he destroyed some monsters and just kind of the typical hero stuff. But his family became cursed later in his life. And I think it depends a little bit on which version of the story you read. Maybe he slew one of the serpents who was sacred to the gods, and that caused all this misfortune on his family. But this is the same family, the royal family of Thebes, that is going to lead into the tragedy of Oedipus. Oedipus, the king, is also a tragedy of the royal family of Thebes. Now, this is a few generations later, but it's the same family. And there's Tiresias, who is the old blind prophet who shows up both in Oedipus and Antigone, is also here in the Bakkhai. He's, if you look him up on Wikipedia, he had a very long life. I guess he was one of these mortals who was blessed with an extended lifespan. So he appears as a prophet in many of the stories of Thebes throughout the generations. And I had completely forgotten this, even though I read the Odyssey. But he also shows up in the Odyssey. Tiresias guides Odysseus through the underworld in the Odyssey. That's a little detail I forgot about. But so there you go. Tiresias shows up in a lot of these. Okay, so it's Cadmus and the cursed royal family of Thebes. At this point, Cadmus is the ex-king. It doesn't really say why. I guess he's retired. Now, I believe his sons have all met tragic ends. So he's just have his daughters left, which means the daughters do not inherit the kingship. So his grandson, Pentheus, is now the king of Thebes. Now, he also had another daughter, Semele, who was impregnated by Zeus and gave birth to Dionysus. So Dionysus is actually Cadmus's grandson and the cousin of Pentheus. Now, according to the myth, which is just kind of hinted at here in this opening dialogue, but which you can read about in Wikipedia, Hera, of course, is jealous of Zeus getting this girl pregnant. Hera is always jealous of all the mortals that Zeus seduces. So Hera convinces Semele to ask Zeus to show her his full glory. Now, no mortal can withstand Zeus's full glory, but Semele gets Zeus to promise it or pesters him by asking or whatever. So Zeus has to do it, and by showing her his full glory, she gets incinerated by it and dies. Dionysus the god is saved by Zeus, and Zeus actually stitches Dionysus into his thigh because Dionysus is still a fetus at this point. So the fetus is going to incubate now in Zeus's thigh, and the mother has been incinerated. But Semele's sisters, Dionysus's aunts and Cadmus's other daughters, start a separate rumor. They say that Semele was lying when she said she was impregnated by Zeus, and that's why she got incinerated, for lying about being incinerated by Zeus. And I guess, I don't know why they start this story, either because they truly believe it, or because they were jealous of her sister. I don't know. I forget if it says. If it says here, I forgot. Anyways, Dionysus is now returning, and he views this lie that Semele's sisters have started as a libel on his person, an insult to him, that they are denying his divine godhood, his divine parentage, and saying he wasn't truly born of Zeus. So he has come to get his revenge on this town. Now, he shows up as a teenager which is, here in the stage directions. I'm not sure if these stage directions are from the original play or added by the translator, but he's in his late teens. He is radiant and uncanny calm. But there's a hint at the fury yet to come, which is going to come later. So he is, because he is returning home to his hometown here in Thebes, where he's angry that he's not being recognized as a god. And in the meantime, he has gotten followers in Asia. So he's bringing his Asiatic followers with him. And he's also touched the minds of all of Simile's sisters, so all his aunts, including the mother of the current king, Pentheus, Agave, as part of his revenge on them. And so they are all in this ecstasy. Now, Cadmus and Tiresias both go out to join in this ecstasy. There are some hints here that Cadmus isn't 100% sure that this is a real god. But he thinks it's safe, politique to embrace the cult. So suppose it's true that Bacchus is no real god. Proclaim him one. It's a fine and distinguished lie. Our Semele then becomes a god's mother. A cult will honor her, and her good luck will shower prestige on our whole family. Remember how your cousin Actaeon died. So Actaeon is another story you may remember if you've read collections of Greek mythology. He's the one who got cursed by Artemis to be turned into a stag and then ripped apart by his own hounds. This is what I mean about all these stories all connecting together in kind of the same family saga. So that was another one of Cadmus's descendants. Anyways, continuing on. So Cadmus and Tiresias go to join the cult of Bacchus. But Pentheus is the current king, is enraged by the cult of Bacchus and wants to stamp it out, and has Dionysus brought before himself. But Dionysus is, I believe, representing himself not as the god, but as the priest of the god. So he's representing himself as a priest of the god. And Pentheus is interrogating him. Dionysus is being cagey with his answers. He's not telling all he wants to know. So Pentheus says, "Tell me about these mysteries of yours." And Dionysus says, "I couldn't tell you. You're not one of us." Pentheus says, "What does this ritual do, for those who join it? We keep that knowledge to ourselves, but it's worth having. You tell me nothing with so much cunning, it makes me ache to hear more. The orgies of God are hard on heretics. You've seen the god up close? What is he like? That's not for me to say. He can look like anyone." Now, according to Wikipedia, there are people who have made parallels between these dialogues and the dialogues of Jesus before Pilate. At this point, all I know from Wikipedia is that some people have said this. I haven't actually researched this in depth. But I can kind of see it. Just like Pilate is trying to get at the truth, and Jesus is giving him really vague, somewhat unhelpful answers. So it seems to be with Dionysus and Pentheus. Dionysus, I believe, is supposed to be represented as giving kind of calm and laconic answers here, even though Pentheus is getting all worked up. Again, maybe as we usually picture Jesus before Pilate. I don't know. I don't know how far you can push this analogy. Like I said, I've not researched it in depth, but it is something I found on Wikipedia. Now, here is where things start getting weird, if they're not getting weird already. Dionysius starts giving Pentheus all sorts of illusions. So Pentheus becomes detached from reality, and he loses his mind, if he hasn't already lost his mind already. And Dionysius is able to persuade what seems to be a shell of Pentheus to disguise himself as a woman and go out and see the Maenads, the followers of Bacchus, of Dionysus. And then if you're at all familiar with the Greek myth, you know that they mistake him for a wild lion and they kill him, and that's the tragedy. But as with Medea, the other play by Euripides I've read, it's recounted in very horrifying detail. So a messenger recalls it, so that Pentheus has fallen into the Maenads. The Maenads are portrayed as having these superhuman powers, presumably got from the god. So they're taking away his false hair to stop her from killing him. He touched her crazed face, this is Pentheus, and says, "Stop, mother, I am Pentheus, your son, born to Echion. Let me leave. Let me live. I have failed you, but don't kill me for that." Saliva poured from her mouth. Her eyes were empty. She was senseless, utterly possessed by Bacchus. And she denied her son. So because of the madness of Bacchus, she doesn't realize it's her son. She thinks it's a wild animal. Grabbing his elbow and digging her foot into his rib cage, she pulled until his shoulder parted. Not because her strength was brute, but the god in her muscles. So he just gets his arm just pulled right off. Am I reading that right? And then Ino, who's another daughter of Cadmus, one of his aunts, worked at the other side, ripping flesh away. Atone, that's another of the aunts, and the whole pack of blood sisters came screaming from their dance to swarm over him. So he's getting his flesh torn off. His arm has been torn off at this point. His mother doesn't recognize him, even though he's pleading for his life. Pentheus threw all the breath he had left into his own death scream, which the woman drowned out, yelping for joy. So, I mean, that's a horrifying description of a man ripped to death, and all he can do is just let out his own death scream with his final energy. Because at this point his arm has been torn off and his flesh is getting torn off. I mean, it's a very horrific description. But it's not done yet because, well, first there's a scene where Agaiv, his mother, has to realize what she's done. So she comes carrying the head of her son and bringing it before Cadmus. Cadmus can see what's happening, but Agaiv is still under the madness of Bacchus. But eventually Cadmus does get her to realize what has happened. And then, again, it's a really, the way everything is described, they're really milking the tragedy. So once she realizes what's happening, she talks about how much she had loved her child. Hold him in my arms. His handsome body made him perfect. I made him once in my womb. How can I do it? Embrace his whole body and kiss him as when he was a child. I mean, it's really making you feel the whole horror and tragedy of this. And the really awful thing is that he's been ripped into so many pieces that they can't even put him back together for a proper burial. We must leave him exactly as he was when he was a king. And Cadmus says, "Child, that cannot be done. Look at him." But then Dionysus appears, and Dionysus has more vengeance he is going to deliver. Now, he's taken out his vengeance on Cadmus, which confuses me a little bit. Because, like I said earlier, at the beginning of the play, Cadmus and Tiresias are embracing this new cult. Partly for political reasons, partly to play it safe. But why is Dionysus so mad at Cadmus? And Cadmus says, I know you now. But Dionysus says, too late. When the time came, you did not know me. So I don't know if this is... Maybe he's just mad because because Cadmus didn't recognize him before he came to Thebes. And joining into the cult once it came to Thebes was too late. I don't know. But the curse on Cadmus is Cadmus and his wife get changed into serpents. So Cadmus, I will change you to a serpent. Your wife Ammonia, the daughter of a god, I name a venomous female snake. So they get changed into serpents, but that's not all. As snakes, you both shall drive an ox cart commanding a vast barbarian army whose killer hordes burn many cities. The oracle of gods proclaim it. So I think what I picked up when I was reading Bulfinch's mythology is I think there are a few different stories where Cadmus gets turned into a serpent at the end of his days. Some versions, this is in revenge for killing a serpent that was beloved by the gods. In some versions, I think his wife says, if a serpent is so sacred to the gods, I would myself a serpent. And this, maybe this is just a different version of the Cadmus getting turned into a serpent version. And then again, there's a really sad thing here where Cadmus is being turned into a serpent. Agave is being sent into exile. And she's trying to, they're having their last meeting. So she says, Father, in our exile we shall not meet. And he says, why hold me, child, like a swan whose white wings shelter its useless father? And then later, now can I tell you, child, where exile must take you. Nor can I tell you, child, where your exile must take you. Your father is too weak to help. So a very pathetic, tragic portrait of a father who is too old and too weak now and too powerless against the gods to help his daughter or to avert his own fate. Cadmus tries to appeal to Dionysus, and he says, God should improve on blind human wrath. So, being this angry and vengeful is not what the gods should do. But Dionysus says, we do improve on it. The agony you now feel, Zeus sharpened and shaped from the first in his cosmic mind. So I guess Dionysus is countering the gods have improved on their wrath by making it more. Now, one of the things I'm slightly confused about is at the end here, this essay seems to be alluding to a slightly different fate. And because the way that this book seems to have been produced, the essay at the end is actually not commissioned for this book. It's just an essay that's floating out there somewhere that they arranged the rights for this book. And as such, the essay is operating under a different translation. The translation is used in the essay here is talking about how all of Thebes is driven into slavery. And that's Dionysus's vengeance. And that's talked about as Dionysus's vengeance on the whole town. Now, that's not the impression I get from reading this translation. And I've read through this a couple of times to see if I'm missing something. So I don't know. I maybe it just chalked that up to how much different translations can differ from each other. The message seems to be the gods just have really horrible vengeance. And the essay here makes the point that it looks like this vengeance was not premeditated from the beginning of the play. Dionysus didn't quite know what he was doing at the beginning, but he worked himself